we will move on to the options for addressing fast food outlets. So we'll move straight on to that item. Now, the last time that we had this come before us, we took the previous paper out of the public excluded section, and now it is an attachment to this report, which enables everyone to look at all of the issues. And we've got a couple of resolutions, but I know that there are councillors who are working up something a little bit stronger to be included as well. So actually, I mean, does somebody want to kind of run through the recommendations and just a brief overview of where we got to, or?
I can certainly do that.
Yeah, thanks, Richard.
So there's...
Can you just introduce everyone? I'm just getting everyone introduced for a period of time until everyone gets to know everyone.
So my name's Richard Osborne, and I'm Head of Planning and Strategic Transport. To my left is Adele Radburn, who's our Senior Planner in the Strategy and Transformation Group. To my further left is Helen Beaumont, who is Head of Strategic Policy. And to my right is Claire Bryant, who is Team Leader Strategic Policy. So without further ado, I'll jump in. I think you have two reports in front of you. One was the previous PX report, which was released last week, and that ostensibly deals with the first question around fast food. The second one was the one that was deferred from last week, which addresses the specific question about potentially using the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act or District Plan to address the issue of fast food, and in particular fast food signage. In relation to that particular report, our advice to you is that neither the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act nor the District Plan are the appropriate vehicle for addressing this issue. And what you would be doing in terms of the District Plan itself, it is not the purpose of that Act to address this issue. And as you know, by extension of the Order in Council out to 2021, that removes our ability to promote public plan changes to that document once it is made operative. But if you were to try and change it within that interim period using the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act, it is our advice to you that it does not meet the purpose of the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act, nor is it likely to meet the necessity test for the Minister to exercise his powers. But in addition to that, what you'd be seeking to do is change the District Plan by using that legislation. And as I mentioned earlier on, it is our advice to you that the District Plan is not the appropriate vehicle to address this issue. So ultimately, if you did go down that path and it were to be successful, you would be seeking to change the District Plan for something that's inappropriate in our mind. So you would end up with something which is possibly ultra vires the Act. In terms of the first report, that's perhaps something that Claire can speak to, but there are a range of recommendations in there in terms of playing a role that council can in supporting a healthy city, promoting a healthy city, lobbying central government, and a whole range of other mechanisms and means.
Sarah.
Thanks. I was just wondering about a comment that Tracy made earlier about Auckland City Council and the fact that they were looking, and I was wondering if you had any comments on that and what they were going through at the moment.
No, so we don't have feedback on that one. We'll get on to it this afternoon.
Aaron and Phil?
Yeah, mine would be a question for Val around planning rules in a city. Is there any city or district in New Zealand, or could we do this, that you have particular planning rules that obviously you have commercial zones, but allow certain things within particular commercial zones? Like we've done it around brothels, like a brothel can't be within an eye line of a school, for instance. You can't see the brothel signage, so on and so forth. And we've done it around churches and things. Can we do that with a premises that is detrimental to health? Because we have this issue with bottle stores as well, that people want bottle stores only placed in certain areas within the city. That is there any way that we can write that into our planning rules
except that every single one of those examples you've used have got their own separate regulatory framework. So they're all subject to legislation. Brothels are subject to legislation, so is alcohol outlets, and it's in the district plan, it's only the consequences of noise and, so you can't have alcohol sold within particular premises, but local alcohol plans can allow for other things, but it's under a statutory framework. There isn't a statutory framework for the harm caused by sugar and fat through the fast food outlets, because you can actually buy them at supermarkets and cook them yourself.
Yes, you can, but you tend to...
I'm not saying that they're any less damaging, but they don't have... It's not recognised in law that there is a regulatory framework that restricts or limits or in any way affects their sales. So, for example, one of the biggest things that could be done would be to cut advertising, television advertising in particular, of all of those fast foods. Well, I'm afraid there hasn't even been an intervention to stop advertising of alcohol on TV. So, we're up against it, but, as I guess what I was saying before, unless we can find a way of working collaboratively with our communities, because this is a community, that consumers could stop this dead in its tracks. Just don't buy it.
Yeah. Sorry, Madam Mayor. I think there's this perception in the public domain that the councils can allow which businesses go where, so we have to be really clear that we can't. That if someone wants to open a gun shop next to a primary school, that's okay. And if someone wants to put a bottle store next to a gun shop next to a primary school, that's okay.
Gun shops are also subject to a separate regulatory framework for arms.
They are for the gun, but is the shop?
Yeah, but it's not just a shop. It's a shop that's subject to a regulatory framework, and yes, you can make provisions around the locations of anything that's subject to a regulatory framework. But fast food isn't.
Right. Oh.
But we have got rules around signage, and I wonder whether some of that reinforces what these kids are seeing on television. Yeah.
Didn't we do that down the Memorial Avenue piece? As we put signage restrictions in?
Yes, but it is Memorial Avenue. It's got its own...
Call everything Memorial.
It's got its own designation. we need more memorials. Yeah, Phil.
Thanks, Richard, for explaining the Regeneration Act part. I just want a clarification for me around this. And are you really saying that we can't use Section 71, even though, one of the primary purposes is to improve the four well-beings for the resilience of our communities, and that includes the social part? So you're really saying that although that's part of the purpose, in fact we can't use Section 71?
Yeah, look, that's our advice to you, is that it'd be, so there's two paths that you could take under the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act. One, and we've attached a couple of attachments which outline the process for you as part of the report, and one of them is Section 71, one is use of a regeneration plan. But our advice to you is that it's, one, unlikely to meet the purpose of that act, but also is unlikely that it will pass the necessity test for the minister to exercise his powers in relation to that particular issue. So it's not just a matter of meeting the purpose of the act. The minister has to consider it reasonably necessary for him to exercise his powers, and we think it's highly unlikely that that would occur. But ultimately, as I mentioned earlier on, what you'd be looking to do is to introduce a change to the district plan, which is a Resource Management Act document, and the single purpose of the Resource Management Act is to promote the sustainable management of natural and physical resources. So that purpose is about use of resources, it's not about the safety and health of users of food supplies. So in all three counts, in our opinion, it doesn't stack up.
Yanni?
Thank you. I just wanted to check in terms of, I understand the University of Canterbury and Healthy Christchurch have actually done research into this. Do you have any information? Have you seen any of the research that they've done, or talk to them about what they may be able to contribute?
Research into what?
Basically the impact of obesity and the location and density of fast food outlets in lower socioeconomic areas and in proximity to schools.
We do refer to the research you might be talking about. It was in a medical journal. The link was in the original, I think, September document to that obesogenic environment and the impact of that, particularly on, and the prevalence of takeaways, this sort of takeaways near schools. So that research has been done, and we provided a link to that in the report. My understanding from our collaboration with Healthy Christchurch is that they're very supportive of some sort of action on this topic. Obviously, given as we know there really is a serious issue here with health and obesity.
Yeah. So just I've heard the explanation around the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act if it was a district plan change, but if it was a regeneration plan that addressed the health impacts of these, given that the research has shown, that there's in lower socioeconomic areas there's 3 times the number and proportion of food outlets, and given that a lot of the lower socioeconomic areas are the ones that were hit hardest in the earthquake and have a lot of redevelopment going on, e.g. Linwood, and possibly Woolston, could we? What I don't understand is, given one of the purposes of the Greater Christchurch Regeneration Act is the social well-being of the community, and that health would obviously fit under that, why we couldn't ask for government to, or the minister to do that, and why you think that that would not be appropriate?
In terms of the research, from a personal perspective, it's not that I don't think that this is an issue. I mean, all the research shows that clearly it is an issue. What we're saying to you is we just don't think that it's an issue where local government has been given the tools to do something about it. And we do not think that the Regeneration Act is the vehicle to do it, nor do we think the Resource Management Act is. In terms of what the definition of regeneration, the Act talks about extending, repair, improving, subdividing land, etc., etc. And it's advice to you, and indeed it's the legal advice that you've had as well, that one, it does not meet the purpose of that Act, but two, it is unlikely to meet the necessity tests as well. So we simply don't think that is the way or means for addressing this issue. It's not that we don't think it's an issue, it's just that we don't think that is the way for addressing it.
So if we wanted to promote a law change or amendment to something in terms of controlling or regulating the location of fast food outlets, either in lower socioeconomic areas or in proximity to schools, so not banning but regulating and controlling the land use activity around those areas, what would your view be the best way to do that?
I think I'd have to defer to my learned friend Mr. Thompson on that one, because it's if we're talking about a local bill or something akin to that, it's not something that I'd be qualified to answer. So would that be acceptable, Councillor?
Yeah, I mean, I'm interested in what the solutions are to this issue.
There's always the opportunity for a local authority to promote a local bill in its area for something that it wants to see achieved. There's a process for going through a local bill. We need to get a minister on or a member of parliament to promote it through the House. It goes through the normal stages. I don't think that's really the issue, though. What you're asking is whether or not we could do that, and I'm sorry, but I can't give you advice off the cuff on that. If you want to have further advice on it, ask staff to provide that for you.
Yeah, which I think we're going to do. But just in terms of the district plan or the regeneration stuff, there's no other mechanism we have to say, actually, can we have an order in council, or can we have an amendment around things like signage that would be that we can do.
No, I mean the issue with signage that the district plan principally addresses is issues of amenity. Because the purpose of the RMA is about promotion of natural, the sustainable management of natural and physical resources, you can't get to that point where you're directing that signage would address the effects of fast food, because that is not the purpose of the RMA. The purpose of the RMA is about something different. So we can put controls in the district plan which address broadly amenity issues, but not the issues that you're asking us to consider.
Unless there's a specific statutory basis for that. Yeah. Anne?
Richard, you were saying that the RMA is about protecting resources. Could we argue that our children are one of our most valuable resources, and therefore their health is of concern under the RMA?
Again, I mean, I think it's not so much that we don't consider it to be an issue ourselves, it's just that our advice to you is we don't see the RMA as being the way for addressing that issue. Our advice is that it's not something that would meet the purposes of the Act, because the Act is about the issues that we have just discussed, and it's not specifically about the safety and health of the users of those food supplies. So it's not an issue which is really addressed. It does talk broadly about those issues, but it's not really the purpose of the Act. So
I think that everyone's. I mean, I think what you're hearing is that people want to do something, but I for one don't want to be doing something that doesn't actually solve the problem or doesn't lead us to a mechanism for solving the problem. And I can't see our problem, which is massive and getting bigger, exponentially bigger all the time, I can't see it being solved by a change to our district plan. So even if we did have that available to us, it wouldn't solve the problem. It is of such magnitude. So it seems to me that what we could offer as a council is a leadership role where we bring together the sort of weight and the benefit of the experience and knowledge within the DHB, and maybe it's the University of Canterbury as well, to actually come up with but it has to be community driven, because if people are just going to continue to accept that this is not going to lead to further and further problems, I can't see us resolving it at all. And if we genuinely want regeneration, then it's not a statutory measure, it's actually changing hearts and minds, and it's actually about providing access to healthy options for eating, which don't mean that children and their families are continuing to eat fast foods on a regular basis. I mean, I don't know. I was brought up in a family that had fish and chips on a Friday for religious reasons. So, but that was our takeaway night. We didn't have takeaways any other night of the week. So, and we were not a wealthy family either. Things have changed. You've got, in my day, Mum didn't work when she had young children, and then when the youngest was 4, Mum and Dad swapped roles, so Dad stayed at home. There was always a parent at home to cook meals. You know, it's not like that anymore. So I think we have to think as a community a lot more about how we support people, because poverty is not just about a lack of income. It's about a lack of hope. It's about a lack of connectedness within the community. There's a lot more that we could be doing together. I heard that example of a healthy eating day where for $1, every kid in that school gets a healthy lunch. What about every day being a healthy eating day for families who can't do that on their own? That's something that we could help lead as a city. Doesn't mean that we have to pay for it. It just means we need to bring together those people that are willing to help others live healthy lives. And I think we could change the way people think and feel about this. But a change to our district plan might make us, every single one of us, feel really good sitting around the table, oh, we've done something. And it won't change a blind thing. It won't change a bit about the future that is coming our way, ready or not. Diabetes, type 2 diabetes, it's entirely preventable. Anyway, oh, that's my speech. So,
Debate.
shall we move to debate? We need a mover and a seconder of the resolutions. Yep.
I mean, it sounds to me like the district plan is not aiding what we're trying to do, which is more community-led planning.
Yeah.
So all these issues, you know, Aaron's raising, alcohol, fast food, whatever, the community's got quite strong opinions on what they want to see in their community. The district plan and the RMA is not actually aiding that. So the question is, do we need a different type of bill or legal framework so that we can actually do the stuff that the communities want to see, whereas we've got this kind of divide and conquer piece in terms of the regulatory structures we have, which are not joined up, and which actually people can't really engage in, and we're left always saying, oh, actually we don't have the power to do that, we don't have the power to do that, and actually people expect us to be able to do that because that's how they think democracy works.
Yeah, there's a report being released next week, which the New Zealand Initiative are releasing the next one in their series of reports, and I'm going up for the release of that. And it's it is precisely about this whole question about local governance. It's about how people should be engaged in that whole process, and it's completely the opposite of the top-down approach that we seem to have in New Zealand. And it would give communities a lot more say over what happens in their local communities. But while we have a structure that still beds back to the RMA, and as soon as you get into a point where you're outside the scope of the legislative framework, then you've got a judicial review on your hands. And that's what we're trying to avoid. So I totally support what you say. We do need a much better planning environment for local communities if we are really to localise decision making. Yanni?
One is the RMA reforms are going ahead now, and the Māori Party is a key supporter of that. So I think there is a window of opportunity. If we thought that health was important for district planning, then actually we should be looking at a strategy of political engagement with MPs and political parties over trying to put forward some of the things that we've heard. And I think there's a tight window of opportunity to do that. I thought people thought that the regeneration would be able to actually talk with communities about what was going on in areas that were having redevelopment, and you know, it's a little bit depressing to hear that, you know, now that really doesn't work in that way.
That's not fair. It's not set up for that purpose.
You know, I mean, if you look at
no, that's right.
Well, except if you look at Linwood and Woolston, two areas which have the potential for fast food outlets. And I mean, in Woolston, there's rumours that a fast food outlet's going right next to a preschool. Like, you know, these are areas that are being regenerated through the impact of the earthquake. That's the whole reason KFC's gone from where it was to probably across the road. So, you know, I do think there's ways that we should be asking central government to make changes, and we should be able to promote at a local level things that can help. But I think the key thing is to look at that local bill, because I mean that's what Manukau did with street prostitution. It does seem ironic to me that you can, if you take a brothel for example, you know, you could argue that there's less health impact of a brothel being, you know, in certain areas than a fast food outlet, and yet we can control a brothel, but we can't control.
It's covered by legislation.
Well, that's the point I'm making. So a local bill,
but it wasn't a local bill. It was a private member's
Manukau
bill that
City
became a bill, an act of parliament.
Yeah. So, but I think there are ways through central government that would enable us to be able to have those conversations. I just worry about, it's important that we work with the community, but when you take things like land use planning, that is a very council-focused role at the moment, and it's very hard for the community to have access to experts, to resources, to actually participate now, and particularly against things like, you know, multinational corporations. So, I think we should work with communities around what we can do, but we shouldn't just leave the burden with them. It has to be resourced properly.
Pauline, have people got questions still? Because otherwise I'm just going to get a mover and a seconder of the resolution. Yeah.
So whether it's worth looking broader than a local bill, because this is an issue that's not just in Christchurch, and whether we actually work with an MP to get a members bill in there, and to, the government's asking us to make local decisions on freedom camping, Easter trading.
Yeah, it has to be drawn
alcohol,
out of a ballot.
Although, I know, but just because it might take a long time doesn't mean it shouldn't be one thing that we also
it might
work on.
never happen. So
Yeah.
I mean, I'd much rather talk to central government
We could do both.
about the issues.
Yeah.
But and maybe the investigate and report back on actions such as proposing legislative change.
Yeah, that would
on
be good.
promotion of healthy food environments.
Yep.
Then if we did that, then we're not restricted to
Okay.
a local bill, but we could talk to government, we could talk about a private member's bill, just opens up the field. Yeah, Pauline, did you have a question? No. Question?
I was just following on from what Raf said. I'd quite like an informal briefing with staff, because of your very nature, your planners, but our communities, the biggest thing that I get with resource consents, and it's not just about fast food, it's about their misunderstanding, or it's almost hamstringing them now, because if they don't get a planner and a lawyer, etc., they're behind the 8 ball. And it's our planners, etc., that decide, say along a road, where the affected parties stop, and the commissioners will recognise or whatever. So the RMA now, I think, alienates our communities, which it actually should be working for. So it's creating a business for lawyers, planners, etc., and it's just the way it is. So I would really like that to look at how we as a council perhaps can start the ball rolling and looking and reversing this, so it's what the kind of citizen-led.
Yeah,
Anyway,
the council will work with local schools and the wider community to encourage and take action on local healthy food initiatives. I think that's part of it as well. But I mean, it's investigate and report back on actions such as legislative. I kind of want something in there about the planning environment as well. So investigate and report back on actions such as legislative change to support a planning environment which allows the community to promote to support a planning regime which allows the community to promote a healthy food environment. A planning regime, I don't know, which allows the community to promote a healthy food environment. Yeah. So kind of pick it up. Right. So are there any other questions? Because
Actually, with central government, in terms of legislative change, is there things like national policy statements or national environmental standards that would be considered as part of this?
I can't even get them to fast track the coastal hazards natural policies, national policy statements. So I don't know. What do you reckon?
Well, I mean, I just
sorry. That was my attempt at
if you're going through
facetious,
like LGNZ and you're talking to other political parties. And,
LGNZ.
I think the other thing that we should be thinking about is talking with ECAN around the odour impacts, because I think Tim's right. The other thing that really annoys people is these things go through non-notified and have adverse effects on people. And in this particular case, you've got KFC with possibly an odour. So I think it would be good to work with ECAN around that. We have talked about that, having that joint up consenting around, air discharge and land use, because it does seem, weird that they're separated with these sorts of things.
Yeah.
So,
look, I think people have to be realistic too. I mean, we are, this is at the front end of what is going to have to be a major community campaign. This is going to have to be a movement of change. It has to be, because we're up against extremely well-resourced companies, corporations, international corporations, multinational corporations who will take our little council on. They took on the City of New York over the sugar tax, and the banning of the really large soda bottles.
Buckets.
Yeah, Michael Bloomberg got asked what he was going to do when he retired as mayor, and he said he was going to lie on a smoke-free beach somewhere, drinking a diet soda. We're taking on the giants, and we have to, because that's the only way that we're going to prevent what is a tsunami of type 2 diabetes rolling our way. I need a mover and a seconder for the
Just before you do that, now that second bullet point only refers to a planning regime, and it is possible to use bylaws.
Okay.
If the central government support.
And one of the regime slash bylaw
Or policy.
Planning and regulatory regime.
Okay, to support a planning and
or regulation
and or regulatory regime.
Yep.
No, go back. Sorry, go back. Put your that's right. And go and or regulatory
regime.
And put a little dash aside thing, between and or.
We are working with other local authorities and with Local Government New Zealand to look at all of the options for addressing this at a national level. Okay. So that would include
it's got an investigation report back on actions such as that. So that enables you really to talk to anyone. Yep. All right. Does somebody actually want to move this resolution? Aaron, seconded Yanni. Is there any discussion? Pauline.
Thanks, Leanne. And I think that what's come out of Tracy's deputation and the actions of the local school there has been wonderful for us, but we can't do this on our own. I really support what you just said, Leanne, the magnitude of this. I would suggest that in B that we do include the University of Canterbury. They're got a leading initiative out there on sustainability, and they could be invaluable. What we have to do is, we don't even know really what we're tackling yet. And I like the fact that Tracy came with a definition today, her definition. And I think that's a piece of work that could actually lead somewhere, particularly the addictive nature, which may actually lead to some more greater ability to actually legislate. But that's down the track. We're at the beginning of this. We've got a two-pronged approach. We've got a possible legislative tool eventually, but we've also got the proactive side. And what we do at council here, supporting community gardens and school gardens and strong communities, is actually going to really help that and assist that. But we've got to reach out and work with everybody that we can. And Leanne, you've asked the community to reach out themselves and involve everybody that they can in this. It is a sea change. As soon as you give up junk food, if you like, fast food, and eat healthy food, the desire for that fast food diminishes rapidly. And I think voting with the wallets is the way that we will speak loudest. But I think this is an exciting beginning for us. We will lead it, but we can't do it on our own. I'll support it.
Yep. Sorry. It doesn't matter. They're all in the mix. Glenn and then Phil. Mike.
Thank you, and partly to try and redeem myself from a hashed up question to Tracy, just let's do what we can do in our built environment, and this is only part of the overall equation. So we have entry points for the community. We've had them for a long time by way of aquatic centres and libraries, especially are well known. In the overall kind of health weight loss equation, exercise accounts for 40%, nutrition accounts for 60%. We have fitness centres and cafes attached to our aquatic centres, etc. But there's a sense in which we're only promoting the 40%. We need to promote the 60%, the nutrition. So what I was trying to say about Linwood and actually every other place that we have in the city, what is stopping us actively pursuing proactively the promotion of nutrition through the cafes, through whatever else is attached to these places, thereby championing what we already have in our policy, which is becoming a healthy city. That de-risks entirely any kind of challenge from the fast food industry. So what I was trying to say about a community such as Linwood is when we do come to put something in place by way of built form, it's an all-round health centre. It doesn't just have a gym and a few swimming pools. It actually has, the cafe. Through our fees and charges, we can offer incentives for people to see health and nutrition as a new future, as opposed to the golden arches and everything else that are springing up around the place. So I think there's a lot we can do. For me, I think the horse has bolted over a lot of this with the district plan and all the fast food places. We can try that, but let's just do what we can do. And I think we already have our own outlets, actually, that we can lift and promote.
Yeah, Phil?
So I certainly support these. I'm just hoping that what we are indicating in the resolutions actually implies that in fact we want to be part of leading a nationwide campaign really around this. And although we know that a straight educational approach doesn't work, people don't really get that, and what is required is a form of an awareness raising for everybody. In fact, it's essential that I guess the reverse of the tsunami, and in fact that we really need to get stuck into this. I think we also, and we're implying it there, that we work with those who already have this information. It's clearly our District Health Board have already done a lot of work in this area, and we'll be working with them too. So in effect, I would see them as leading the actual work on this, but that we're asking for a working group to be set up.
Thank you. Mike?
Thank you. I support this too. I just wonder, and I totally agree with what Dion says around the other outlets. It's not just fast food. This is a big picture. Now, I grew up in Woolston, both post and pre-McDonald's, but it was the dairies that we went to with our dollar, and you can buy a lot with a dollar, lots and lots of sugar. But I guess what we did back then is we didn't have PlayStations, we didn't have smartphones, so there was a lot of physical activity, which I think is also missing now from the younger kids. They don't get out and play as much. So it's a combination of lots of factors that we need to address. Now, as a community board, we've got the edible gardens, which we're getting into preschools and trying to educate preschoolers about actually gardening and eating healthy at that stage as well.
All right, I'll put that motion. All those in favour say aye. Much, and thanks for all the work on that.